Well, what started as another night of laughter in Riyadh turned into something no one saw coming. The lights dimmed, the crowd roared, and then, Dave Chappelle froze. He looked across the audience, took a long breath, and said, "It's easier to talk here than in America." The room fell silent. Cameras stopped shaking. In that split second, the world's funniest man became its most dangerous truth-teller. Within hours, clips exploded across TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter, millions replaying one haunting question. Why would Chappelle risk everything to say that? Because behind the joke was something darker. A secret buried under FBI files. A tragedy tied to the Kirk family. And a cover-up powerful enough to silence Hollywood, Washington, and maybe even him. So before we pull back the curtain on what really happened, hit like, tap subscribe, and share this story. Because the truth they're hiding might not stay online for long. This wasn't comedy anymore. This was a confession, wrapped in a punchline. The stage lights in Riyadh burned bright that night, a sea of faces, laughter echoing through the hall, the kind of energy that only Dave Chappelle could command. For the first 20 minutes, it was classic Chappelle, sharp, fearless, hilarious. Then something shifted. He paused, stared into the crowd, and dropped a line that felt more like a warning than a joke. "It's easier to talk here than in America." The silence was immediate, thick, uncomfortable, electric. Phones went up. Cameras locked in. Within minutes, the clip was racing across social media platforms like wildfire. In the West, commentators called it defiance. Others called it desperation. But one thing was clear, Dave Chappelle had crossed a line that most entertainers never dare to approach. News outlets scrambled to decode the meaning. What did he mean by easier to talk? Was he mocking censorship in the US, or hinting at something deeper? That's when the conversation took a darker turn, when people noticed who Chappelle mentioned next. The name that turned laughter into gasps, Charlie Kirk. From that moment, it wasn't just a comedy show. It became an international storm, part free speech debate, part political thriller. And it was only getting started. Within 24 hours, the ripple became a shockwave. Late-night host Jimmy Kimmel referenced the Chappelle clip on his show, joking that comedians are now doing what journalists won't. The next morning, ABC announced his temporary suspension, no explanation given. That's when people started connecting dots. Conservative commentator Candace Owens went live, demanding transparency. If Chappelle, Kimmel, and others are being silenced for speaking about the same thing, what is the FBI hiding? She asked. Her live stream hit 12 million views overnight. Suddenly, three voices from opposite worlds, Chappelle, Kimmel, and Owens, were aligned in one accidental crusade for truth. Memes flooded X and Reddit, the unholy trinity versus the system. What began as a joke in Saudi Arabia was now a headline in Washington. And somewhere in the shadows of that chaos, the FBI's silence said more than any press release ever could. And that's when the story took its most chilling turn. Because every thread Chappelle, Kimmel, and Candace tugged on led straight to one man, Tyler Robinson, the supposed lone gunman behind the shooting that claimed Charlie Kirk's life. According to the FBI's official report, Tyler was a 22-year-old college student, politically radicalized online, who opened fire outside a Turning Point USA event before being neutralized on scene. The narrative was neat, too neat. Within hours, the Bureau labeled the case closed. No motive. No accomplices. No deeper questions asked. But then came the leaks. Footage surfaced showing a man fleeing across rooftops moments after the supposed shooter had already been pronounced dead. Witnesses described hearing two different guns, two different calibers. Even stranger, Tyler had been partially paralyzed from a car accident just months before. So how did a man who could barely stand suddenly perform a precision assault? Podcasters and journalists began digging. Joe Rogan called it the least believable federal report in years. Alternative media outlets started piecing together inconsistencies, timestamps, angles, shell casings. And when Candace Owens shared photos of FBI evidence tags marked before the incident's public timestamp, the internet went into meltdown. Was this another lone wolf story, or something staged to protect a bigger secret? The more questions surfaced, the deeper the silence grew. The FBI stopped commenting. Mainstream anchors went quiet. And that's when Chappelle's cryptic comment, "It's easier to talk here than in America," started to sound less like irony and more like a warning. The more independent reporters studied the Tyler Robinson case, the more it started to look like a puzzle that someone didn't want solved. One small detail buried in the local police log, later leaked online, drew immediate attention: the recovered bullet casings. They weren't standard. Each casing had been etched with markings that didn't match any known manufacturer codes. Investigators described them as unique identifiers, possibly personal engravings, but the purpose was unclear. Forensic analysts who reviewed early photos noticed odd phrases stamped into the metal, short words, almost like symbols. Before local media could dig deeper, the entire evidence file was reclassified. The FBI took control of the scene, removed the physical samples, and shut down public access to the report. Local officers were told the case had become a federal matter. No further explanation followed. That's when things went silent. No official press briefings. No follow-up statements. And for the first time, even the family of Charlie Kirk seemed to vanish from public view. Their social media pages went dark, their foundation events were quietly postponed, and news outlets that tried to reach them were told, no comment. To many online, that silence felt heavier than any statement could. The strange markings, the sudden federal takeover, and the disappearing witnesses, all of it hinted at a story much larger than a lone shooter. What had started as a tragedy was now looking like a message, one the public was never meant to decode. As weeks passed with no word from Charlie Kirk's parents, public attention turned to the only person still visible, his wife, Erica Kirk. Her first appearance came not through a press conference, but through a short live stream shared by Turning Point USA's official account. She looked composed, but distant, speaking briefly about continuing Charlie's mission. That single clip was enough to ignite speculation across the internet. Commentators noticed how quickly Erica seemed to assume control of the organization her husband had built. Within days, board members confirmed she had taken over as interim president. For some, it was a sign of strength and continuity; for others, it felt uncomfortably fast, almost pre-planned. Reporters digging into her background found she had once worked as a media consultant for several political campaigns, though records of her contracts were sparse. Old colleagues described her as strategic and reserved, the kind of person who preferred staying behind the curtain. Suddenly, she was center stage, and every move she made was being watched. Online, theories multiplied. Some insisted she was protecting her husband's legacy. Others believed she was guarding information that powerful groups wanted kept quiet. What united both sides was the feeling that Erica Kirk knew far more than she was saying. The focus on her only intensified as the FBI investigation faded from headlines. With Charlie's parents silent and local authorities sidelined, she became the sole public link to a story that refused to die. And just when it seemed the attention might fade, whispers began circulating that even Dave Chappelle himself had mentioned her name again, this time, not as a punchline, but as part of a warning. Dave Chappelle's second mention of Erica Kirk came weeks later during an unannounced set in London. It wasn't part of a routine, it slipped out mid-conversation, almost as if he was thinking aloud. Observers said his tone had changed. The jokes were fewer, the pauses longer. He spoke briefly about power protecting itself, and the crowd sensed something beneath the humor, a warning wrapped in discomfort. Soon after that performance, Chappelle reportedly postponed his US tour dates, citing scheduling issues, but insiders whispered about something else: fear. By now, the FBI inquiry had vanished from mainstream coverage, and yet whispers around Hollywood and Washington kept growing. Comedians, journalists, and podcasters all seemed to agree on one thing: Chappelle was saying out loud what many were too afraid to mention. And for the first time, it felt like he might be paying a price for it. While Dave Chappelle was retreating from the spotlight, another familiar face was being pushed out of it. Jimmy Kimmel, who had already drawn attention for referencing Chappelle's Riyadh remarks, suddenly found himself at the center of his own controversy. During a late-night segment, Kimmel discussed media silence around federal investigations, a brief comment that aired once and was quietly removed from online archives hours later. Days later, network executives announced his temporary leave. No official reason was given, but industry insiders claimed pressure had come from higher up, possibly from within Washington itself. It didn't take long for social media to connect the dots. First Chappelle, now Kimmel. Both men had questioned narratives tied to the same event, and both had gone quiet soon after. Commentators began calling it the comedy blackout, a moment when satire collided with censorship. News outlets avoided the story, but online audiences refused to let it fade. Independent reporters began tracking strange coincidences, funding changes in media networks, unexplained FCC reviews, and public figures backing away from similar topics. And through it all, Chappelle remained silent, his earlier words echoing louder with every day that passed. Independent media outlets started calling it the DC pipeline, a quiet stream of money connecting the tragedy, the investigation, and political circles far beyond the public eye. For many following the story, one unsettling conclusion was starting to form: whatever happened to Charlie Kirk and his family wasn't random. It was orchestrated, and the people behind it were still moving pieces in the dark.